Safety for MRC volunteers, which is, I think, very important and timely. And our presenter this evening is Mariel Waller. Mariel is the local health emergency coordinator for the Hampton and Peninsula Health District. She holds a Master of Public Health degree from George Washington University and earned her undergrad degree in political science with a focus on government, along with a major in Homeland Security and emergency preparedness from VCU. In her role, Mariel leads teams and oversees oversees district-wide emergency preparedness programs, including planning for disease outbreaks, bioterrorism threats, and other public health emergencies. She manages grant-funded initiatives, develops and tests emergency response plans, and ensures critical systems like the Strategic National Stockpile are ready when needed. A Yorktown, Virginia native, she's thrilled to serve the areas where she grew up. Outside of work, Mariel enjoys spending time with her family, exploring the outdoors, kayaking on Virginia rivers, and fishing. And she will be assisted this evening by Rebecca Breedlove-Berry, the MRC coordinator, also from Hampton and Peninsula. So, Mariel, take it away.
Alrighty, hopefully y'all are able to see my screen. Thank you for being here. My name is Mariel Waller. I am the local health emergency coordinator for the Hampton and Peninsula Health Districts, and I'm here to talk about cold weather safety. If you are not here to hear about cold weather safety, please stick around. Hopefully you'll learn something new, but if you are, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to hear me talk a little bit about what we have gone through in the last year, as well as how to keep yourselves, your loved ones, and your community safe, because it is the season. Alrighty, so just a few objectives for this training. We want to make sure that you guys understand the impacts and lessons learned from Winter Storm Kingston, which impacted the Hampton Roads region earlier this year. We also want you guys to be able to strengthen your personal and family preparedness for winter weather and all cold weather. Identifying key public health and MRC roles during winter emergencies and cold weather emergencies is critical, and applying best practices for community response and coordination, as well as any type of MRC deployments that you all may partake in during cold weather. So to start us out, we have Winter Storm Kingston. Now, I do want to make a note that the National Weather Service does not name winter storms. Winter Storm Kingston's name came from the media, and it was significantly easier to refer to the storm as Kingston than winter weather event number 31, if memory serves correctly. So we had impacts by Winter Storm Kingston in February of this year, specifically February 19th through 20th. The forecast had shifted significantly in the preceding days before the storm made itself known in our area. We were ranging from 3 to 4 inches of snow initially to the high end of 15 inches. But in all reality, about 8 to 12 inches of snow fell across the Hampton Roads region and caused significant impacts. On top of the snow, we had some freezing rain, some ice, as well as high winds. The top wind speed was noted at 31 miles an hour. So it was almost whiteout conditions for areas of the Hampton Roads. It was also important to note that Governor Youngkin had extended continued the earlier state of emergency declaration that he had initially called or declared at the beginning of February. And the emergency declaration is especially important because it allows us more leeway in our response activities, especially when working with local governments. So what did we see here on the peninsula? We had significant power outages. It was hundreds to thousands of impacted homes, businesses, and other structures that lost power at some point during the storm. We were watching the Dominion Power Tracker very, very closely throughout the impact of the storm to make sure that there weren't any widespread outages or critical facilities that were impacted by a loss of power. There were also roadway shutdowns. Portions of Interstate 64 were temporarily shut down. due to hazardous conditions. And if y'all are from this area, or if you have traveled on Interstate 64, you know that that is a very important road to get around our area. And any shutdowns could significantly impact motor traffic and then also cause additional congestion on side streets and surface streets. And just about every school and government office in our area was closed, which caused significant disruption for folks everywhere. So that's your DMV, that's your local public health office or your health department. Kids were home from school for, I think, 3 to 4 days before things started opening back up once the snow and ice started to melt. But what did we do? So we knew the storm was coming ahead of time. We kind of saw it start moving in from the west, laying a little bit of snow on the western part of the state as well as the Carolinas. But once it started to inch its way up to the Hampton Roads region, that is when we really started to put our snow pants on and get ready to work. We had 2 localities, the city of Hampton and the city of Newport News, both declare local emergencies, and that caused them to open their emergency operations center for 24/7 operations. And when that happens, we as the Emergency Preparedness and Response Office of the Health Department also activate with them. So for the duration of those locality or local government emergency operations centers being open, there was a public health staff member available 24/7. Throughout this event, we had one locality visit a shelter that was operated by a nonprofit organization that provided services, shelter, and food services to unhoused populations in one of our cities. And that shelter was very quickly reaching capacity and then ultimately was over capacity. So the decision was made by the fire chief as well as the city emergency manager to open up a city managed shelter. This call for opening a shelter came at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday, wherein there was already, I believe, 4 to 5 inches of snow on the ground. It was February, so it was dark outside. So that really kind of tested our capabilities to make sure that we are able to deploy our resources safely. So when we are opening a shelter here in Hampton and Peninsula, we send 2 public health nurses, an environmental health specialist. So we had about an hour and a half lead time from when we were notified that this shelter was opening to when they would start receiving shelter residents. So we had to move very quickly. And remember how I said earlier that some of the major roadways were shut down and that there was already 4 inches of snow? So we had a pretty significant obstacle for making sure that our folks were getting out there safely. So we worked with the city, we worked with our internal staff to make sure that everybody was comfortable to drive in the snow and get there safely, and also emphasize the need for them to take their time, right? We had an hour and a half until shelter residents started arriving, but that was not an indicator for them to start speeding and potentially encounter unsafe road conditions to try to get to the shelter as quickly as possible. So the lessons we learned from that, making sure that our staff who are deployed are self-aware in their comfort level of driving through inclement weather, especially through winter weather and cold weather. I don't know about y'all, but us Southerners don't always drive the best in the snowy conditions, even if there's just a light dusting. I think folks tend to forget how to drive a little bit. So making sure that everybody is getting there safely, and then also that early activation piece. So making sure that leading up to any type of deployments of our staff or our volunteers, we are making sure that they are notified as soon as possible so they can begin making the appropriate preparations for deployment. So now, cold weather hazards. So we have ice, snow, and rain, and then the general cold temperatures and the wind. So when you think about cold weather, you're like, oh, I have to layer up, maybe leave a little extra room to brake if I'm driving on potentially snowy or icy roads. But there are significant additional hazards associated with all of these. So ice can bring down trees and topple utility poles and communication towers and create extremely dangerous road conditions. So when we were looking at the power outage maps, a significant portion of those power outages were caused by fallen trees and branches onto utility poles. So making sure that if you are driving out in these conditions, you are paying attention to your surroundings, and making sure that the roadway is clear, and if there is a hazard, to allow yourself appropriate space and time to navigate around that obstacle in the road. Snow and rain, especially in heavy accumulation amounts, can block roadways, cause roof collapses in structures, and delay any emergency services that may be called out for. Freezing rain and sleet can create hazardous travel conditions. Downed trees and power line damages, as we also mentioned, all can compile on top of each other and really make a tricky situation when navigating on the roadways. The cold and the wind can, especially in prolonged exposure, can lead to frostbite, hypothermia, and increased medical emergencies, especially in medically vulnerable populations. And also, on top of the wind and any type of precipitation, whether it be freezing rain, regular rain, or snow, high winds can cause whiteout conditions, which can impact visibility both on the roadway and otherwise. So if you are looking at information about winter storms, you usually see one or two types of winter storms, if you will. You can see winter storm watches and winter storm warnings. When winter storm watches are issued, this is meant to alert the public of a possibility of a winter storm event impacting the area within 12 to 48 hours. So similar to a tornado watch or a hurricane watch, they are warning you in advance. The storm itself is not there yet, but it is expected to make impacts in your area in the coming hours or days. Winter storm warnings are issued when the winter weather is imminent or is actively happening. So that means that it is in your area. You will start to see the effects almost immediately or in a short time frame after the warning is issued when the event begins. And winter storms can encompass anything from low temperatures mixed with snowfall, high winds, freezing rain, sleet, or any significant change in conditions. Alrighty, so we talked about the actual threats and hazards from the storm itself. Now let's talk a little bit more about the downstream effects or associated hazards of a winter storm. So as we kind of touched on earlier, any type of winter weather or cold weather can cause secondary hazards that can just be as dangerous or more dangerous than the actual storm itself. So again, that heavy snow, any icing, and significant winds can lead to dangerous road conditions, power outages, damage to infrastructure, and limited access to emergency services. So, dangerous road conditions, icy roads, especially if it has rained recently before any snowfall hits. That water that has not yet been absorbed by the roadways will sit on top and freeze and create a nice cold layer that then additional precipitation, whether it be rain, sleet, or snow, will lay on top on, and it will not be absorbed by the roadways, which can make it very dangerous. That phenomenon is often called black ice. Reduced visibility on the roadways, both from any type of wind, precipitation, as well as limited daylight hours during the winter season. And you also have to look out for other folks. So sometimes these dangerous road conditions will cause traffic or stranded motorists. So being mindful of the others on the roadways with you, making sure that there's an appropriate distance between you and other vehicles in your immediate vicinity, as well as on the shoulders of interstates and surface streets. Power outages are a huge deal, especially when we're looking at the public health impacts of any type of cold weather. So down power lines and any type of increased demand for energy. So folks are running their heat, they're running, their gas appliances. That increased burden on the power grid or the power system can lead to blackouts or power outages on top of the potential impacts from down trees and branches that impact the utility poles themselves. And then we look at frozen pipes and infrastructure damage. So when it's really, really cold out for an extended period of time, we start to see, usually at a household level, some water supply impacts where folks, water pipes in their homes or their offices begin to freeze, and then we see burst pipes or an interruption to water supply. And that is a huge problem because folks need water to live. And when we start to look at that on a larger scale, especially assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities, if there's any type of disruption to those water supplies, that is an immediate cause for concern and would mount a significant response to solve that issue. Alrighty, and now just the health and safety impacts on an individual level of all of the major hazards and the associated hazards of cold weather. So we see cold-related illnesses, prolonged exposure to cold temperatures, especially temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, can lead to hypothermia and frostbite, both of which have the capacity to become life-threatening if not recognized and treated quickly. We also see increased carbon monoxide poisoning when it's cold and folks are trying to warm their spaces and their homes. People often turn on generators, especially if there has been a power outage, any type of grills or auxiliary or alternative heating sources, which can produce carbon monoxide if used indoors or without appropriate ventilation within the space that you are using those alternative heating sources. And then injuries, so your slip, trips, and falls with those icy and potentially snowy conditions. It can lead to slips, trips, and falls, in addition to any type of motor vehicle accidents. And additionally, overexertion is a huge source of injuries related to cold weather. When folks are out shoveling the roadways or their driveways, it is easy to overexert, and it can cause strain on your body, and it can also cause strain on your heart. So we see an increased amount of calls for service for cardiac events such as heart attacks and things like that when folks are out shoveling in the snow. So those are things to be mindful of when in cold weather. So hypothermia. You can get it by being exposed to cold, wind, or wet conditions, or all three. And hypothermia is diagnosed when your core body temperature falls below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So remember, back to high school biology class, your body's supposed to be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And now that shift from 98.6 to 95 might not seem significant, but the impacts are big. So you'll start to see different signs and symptoms. So shivering, confusion, slurred speech, drowsiness, and poor coordination are usually the dead giveaways for someone experiencing hypothermia. In order to treat hypothermia in the immediate time period following that recognition, you want to move that individual to a warm and dry location. So if they are inside or outside, bring them inside, and making sure that you're trying to eliminate their exposure to any environmental hazards like the cold. You want to remove any wet clothing. So if they are in, kind of a snowy, kind of damp winter coat, you want to make sure that they take that off. The immediate logic goes, well, if they're cold, then you need to keep their winter coat on to keep them warm. But in all reality, if you are wearing damp or wet clothing, that will continue to lower your body temperature. So you want to try to remove that portion of the exposure to the cold. And you want to begin warming them gradually. All right, so you don't want to do it all at once because that sudden shift in temperature can cause a shock to their system and impact their prognosis. So use blankets, body heat, and you also want to get them to medical care as soon as possible. And the way to avoid hypothermia is dressing in layers. So having thermal layers, waterproof layers, hats, gloves, scarves, earmuffs, extra socks, and waterproof shoes are extremely beneficial in trying to prevent hypothermia. You also want to limit your time outdoors, right? So if you are going to be in 30-degree weather, you want to be outside in that temperature range for no more than about 30 minutes before you have 45 minutes of warming up away from the cold. Frostbite is a freezing of skin and underlying tissues due to extreme cold exposure. So that's when your hands turn red and you can't move them as normal. You maybe see some paling of the nail beds, and you see it most commonly in your extremities, so your fingers, your toes, and on your head, in your nose, ears, cheeks, and your chin, so you'll kind of get red. The symptoms of frostbite are numbness, tingling, any type of pale or waxy skin, or hard or blistered tissue. And that is a result of your body going, oh, it's cold, I need to circulate all of my blood to my core to try to keep the essentials warm. So the blood circulation to your extremities is lessened, and that's where that discoloration, that numbness, and that tingling comes from. So the first aid response to any type of frostbite is, again, removing that individual from the exposure. So if they are outside in the elements, bringing them inside, trying to get them away from the cold as quickly as possible. You want to warm the impacted areas, so your hands, your feet, your nose, your ears, gently with body heat. Do not immediately put the cold or frostbitten hand under a hot faucet. And the reason for that is, again, that significant change in temperature will cause a shock to the body, but also because of the numbness and tingling associated with frostbite, that person may not have the same pain response to that high heat. So if you are running someone's hand under a very hot faucet and their hand is numb, they may not feel the hot water coming, and normally they would yank it out. So that can also cause tissue damage. And again, seeking medical care for severe or blistered frostbite is essential because the medical providers will need to get in there and try to slowly warm the impacted extremity back up to temperature to prevent any type of long-term tissue damage. And the way to avoid frostbite is very similar to that of hypothermia, making sure you're wearing insulated, waterproof clothing, making sure that your skin is covered, so hands, feet, gloves, double socks, avoid tight boots or gloves that can reduce circulation because we want to make sure that we can all move our fingers and toes. Carbon monoxide poisoning. So, it's caused by an improper use of portable generators, grills, stoves, or heaters indoors or in closed spaces. We see a lot of folks, if there is any type of power outage in their home, they will run their generator, and because it's cold outside, they will put their generator in their garage. Please don't do that. That is not good. When a generator is operating, it needs to be in a very well ventilated area, preferably outdoors, because the off-gassing of that generator when it is in use puts off carbon monoxide, and that can get into your ventilation system in your homes. We also see carbon monoxide poisoning as a result of poorly maintained chimneys. So if you have a fireplace in your house, you want to make sure that you are regularly sweeping it, making sure that there are no blockages, because if there is a blockage in any point in the chimney, you have a risk of that carbon monoxide not being able to be released, and it will build up in an enclosed space like your house or your living room. And also, if you are warming up your vehicle before you use it, please do so in a well-ventilated area. Do not have your garage door shut and the vehicle started, because again, similar to that generator, there is no way for that carbon monoxide that is being put out to be released, and it will build up, and that can cause significant issues. So if you are warming up your vehicle before you drive it, which is recommended, and you store your vehicle in a garage or an enclosed space, make sure that you crack the garage door to allow airflow and ventilation. The symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, remember, it is odorless, tasteless. You cannot detect it until you start to see symptoms. So headache, dizziness, nausea, weakness, confusion, shortness of breath, blurred vision are all signs and symptoms of potential carbon monoxide poisoning. In severe cases, after long periods of exposure to carbon monoxide, you will start to see loss of consciousness, potentially cardiac arrest, and in extremely long exposures, potentially death. So in order to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning, never use generators, grills, or charcoal grills indoors. Making sure that you're keeping your fuel burning appliances properly vented and maintained. Installing carbon monoxide detectors in your homes and making sure that the batteries are checked regularly. If your fire system in your house does not have a carbon monoxide attachment, I highly recommend that you get one. And then regularly check the batteries and test it at the same interval that you do your smoke alarms. And making sure that you are ensuring proper ventilation in any type of enclosed space, like your garages, where fuel burning devices are used, so your cars and your generators. Cold weather injuries. So common causes, we kind of mentioned this earlier: slips, trips, and falls on any type of precipitation or accumulated precipitation on the ground. So that's your ice, your snow, or any type of wet or slippery surfaces. We also see a lot of folks get injured in traffic accidents due to those unsafe road conditions, poor visibility, or vehicle malfunctions on roadways. Overexertion is also common, primarily from shoveling snow, clearing driveways, or moving heavy objects, so like down trees or additional debris that may be in your path of travel, making sure not to overexert yourself. So the way to avoid it, making sure that you're wearing appropriate footwear with good traction. So generally it is not recommended that you wear Crocs in the snow. They do not have good traction, and if you are on any type of ice or snow, there's a risk you may slip, trip, or fall. If you are going down stairs or any type of walkway that has a handrail available, it is recommended that you use that handrail for an additional point of balance to make sure that you don't trip down the stairs or on any icy surfaces. If you're in your vehicle, making sure that you drive slowly, keeping that extra distance from cars in front of you. Generally, when you're driving during good weather conditions, it's recommended that you have 2 car lengths in front of you before the next vehicle in your lane of travel. It is recommended that you double that during unsafe road conditions. So if there's snow, ice, or sleet on the ground or actively falling from the sky, it is recommended that you have at least 4 car lengths in front of you before the next vehicle. So that way you have an appropriate amount of time to brake to avoid any type of accidents or collisions in your vehicle. And if you're out shoveling snow, do so safely. So making sure that you're using the proper lifting technique, lifting with your legs, not your back. Make sure you take breaks and avoid overexertions. Alrighty, so your first aid in response to cold weather injuries. Treat your scrapes, sprains promptly as you normally would. So icing any type of sprains or muscle strains, appropriate bleeding control and infection prevention measures for any type of scrape or cut. And if there is a suspected broken bone or fracture, any type of head injury or chest pain, making sure that you seek medical care immediately. For vehicle accidents, making sure that you prioritize your safety. So if there is an accident that you are not involved in, making sure that you are in a safe space to either go help or request emergency services for the folks impacted by the accident. And you want to make sure that you are visible. So if you stop in the middle of traffic, you are at risk of a secondary collision in response to the first collision. So making sure that you're out of the way and in a safe space. So that you can render the appropriate aid or request the appropriate emergency services. So we've talked about a lot about all the bad things associated with cold weather, but now we're going to talk about how we can prepare. So we're going to go over a personal winter preparedness kit, things you can do for your home to prepare for winter and cold weather, general vehicle and travel preparedness, and then how you can communicate with your family and plan accordingly to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that everybody remains safe during cold weather. And you guys are volunteers, so you have to make sure it's similar to, you know, what the flight attendants tell you when you're on a flight. You know, you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help those around you. And the same principle applies here. In order for you all to safely and effectively help those in your community, you want to make sure that you, yourself, and your loved ones are taken care of first. So being prepared allows you to do so and reduces the risks associated with any type of deployment during cold weather. And the general mantra is take care of yourself, your family, and then your community. So, what do we put in a personal winter preparedness kit? You want to make sure that you have warm clothing. So making sure that if you are out and about, you have the appropriate clothes for the weather. So dressing in multiple layers to trap your body heat, to keep yourself warm. And that includes thermal underlayers, waterproof outer layers, gloves, hats, scarves, and insulated boots. An extra plug for hats because you lose most of your body heat through your head and your neck. So making sure that those areas are covered helps you stay warmer longer. And then also having a stash of extra socks and gloves are extremely important too, just in case your primary pair gets wet. You can exchange those out and reduce the risk of that frostbite that we talked about earlier. You want to make sure that you also have lighting and power in your emergency kit. So a flashlight or a headlamp with extra batteries or a powerless way to charge. So that could be like a solar power charger in the event that you lose power and you need a lighting source. Additionally, portable phone chargers or a power bank to charge your essentials like your cell phone. So you're able to receive any type of emergency communications or updates regarding the cold weather event. You also want to have a first aid kit and any health related supplies you may need. So that could be a basic first aid kit with your Band-Aids, your antiseptic wipes, your pain relievers, and any personal medication. So if you're going to be out traveling during a winter storm event, you want to make sure that you have all of your medications and your family's medications with you on your person in the event that there is any type of disruption and you're not able to return home to get those medications. And it's always good to have hand sanitizers and masks as well, because generally when we're seeing cold weather, we are also seeing a rise in respiratory illness and GI illness. So would not hurt to stay extra prepared and keep your hand sanitizer and your surgical masks handy. Food and water is extremely important. I don't know if y'all remember, but a few years ago, we got some snow on I-95 in the northern part of the state, and there was a significant backup and standstill that lasted for, I want to day, at least 8 hours, if I remember correctly. So making sure that you have food and water, because that is a long time to be stuck on the interstate. So non-perishable, high-energy snacks, either in your vehicle or in your home if there's a disruption to power or you're not able to access your kitchen. Making sure that you have at least 1 gallon of water per person per day. And that also includes your pets. So if there's a family of 4, um, you want 1 gallon per person per day. So that's 4 gallons a day times 3, because we planned for 3 days, that would be 12 gallons of water. And then if there were any pets, that would be an additional gallon for them. When you're thinking about what kind of food to put in an emergency kit, think about food that will give you good energy, a good balanced meal without having to potentially be refrigerated or heated up with your typical cooking appliances in the event that there is any type of power disruption to where you are. And then also keeping important documents in cache. So any copies of your IDs, your medical insurance cards, your emergency contacts, and any critical medical information. Again, in any type of power outage or you're in a situation where you cannot access where you normally store those documents, having a copy is extremely beneficial. And then additionally, small amounts of cash are always recommended because in cold weather events, we do see those large widespread power outages, and ATMs are impacted by those, as are credit card and debit card readers. So generally, it is recommended that you have a small amount of cash to be able to handle any necessary transactions while the power is out. And then just optional things that you can include, if you're storing your personal preparedness kit in your vehicle, you can add an ice scraper and a small shovel to be able to effectively clear off your windows and remove the snow on or around your car so that you are able to operate it safely. Any type of hand warmers or chemical heat packs. The most common brand name, I think, is Hot Hands. They're those small little packs that you just pop and then they heat up, keep you warm. Emergency blankets are also especially important in vehicles. Those can be just your regular blankets or they can be the tinfoil blankets that you keep with you, as well as a sleeping bag in the event that you do get stranded in a vehicle. Any type of multi-tool or small utility knife. This is especially important if your emergency kit includes canned goods. You want to be able to get into those cans, so making sure that you have a can opener or a pocket knife or something that would allow you to open them is extremely important. And then, like we said earlier, extra hat or gloves for any type of extended exposure, and then making sure that you have enough warm clothes for everybody that you're traveling with. Alrighty, so how can we prepare our homes? Protecting your home protects you and your family and your property and ensures that you, if you should choose to deploy during a cold weather event, you are able to. So insulating your pipes and sealing your drafts in your home. You want to prevent frozen or burst pipes by insulating exposed plumbing. You can also run your taps when the temperature is expected to get below freezing, just a slow drip to keep that water flow going, and that helps prevent any type of freezing or potentially burst pipes. Making sure you seal your windows and doors to reduce heat loss and lower your energy use. I've seen folks use long tube socks filled with rice and they put them at the bottom of their doors and or windows, and that helps seal the draft to keep the heat inside and the cold air outside. And then additionally using any type of commercial weather stripping, door sweeps to block the cold air from coming in through any cracks or crevices. You want to make sure that you're checking your smoke detectors and your carbon monoxide detectors, making sure that they are tested monthly and making sure that you replace the batteries at least annually. I highly recommend replacing batteries in your smoke detectors and your carbon monoxide detectors every time it is daylight savings time. So once in the spring, once in the fall, that's a good interval to make sure that those are functional and operational should you need them. Making sure that you have your backup heating sources stored and are used appropriately. Again, making sure they're away from things that could potentially ignite and making sure that they are in areas that are well ventilated. Making sure that you're not using those outside cooking appliances inside the house, again, because of that risk of carbon monoxide poisoning, as well as any potential fire hazards. And then making sure you're keeping them away from things that can catch on fire. So if you have a personal space heater, you want to make sure that it is not directly next to any type of plastic or flammable material, because even that radiating heat could be enough to start a fire. You want to make sure that you're stocking up on your essential supplies outside of the supplies that are in your emergency kit. So extra food, extra water, heating fuel, for at least 3 days, because that is how long FEMA recommends planning for during any type of emergency. Making sure you have your blankets, your warm clothing, and any necessary medical supplies, and making sure that all of the supplies that you prepare is easily accessible. So if you make your big, beautiful kit, it has everything you'll ever need, and then you put it in the attic, but then you're not able to access the attic. That's not going to help you if you need it. So making sure that it is readily accessible and making sure that everybody in your household knows where to access it is key to helping you get through a cold weather event. And then also knowing your emergency shutoffs for the different utilities and appliances in your house are important. So making sure you know how to shut off the water, the gas, and electricity in your home. Making sure that you can, find the power breaker, you know which one to turn off. If you go outside, you know where to turn off the water. So in the event there's a burst pipe, you're not flooding your home. And same thing with gas. You don't want a damaged gas line to be releasing any type of natural gas or propane into your home. This helps prevent further damage and injury during storms or emergencies. So when you're out and about during cold weather, you want to make sure that you are preparing your vehicle and your travel plans appropriately. So it's recommended that you keep at least half a tank of gas in your vehicle at all times. I know that's sometimes hard to do. I am the worst at forgetting that I need to fill up the tank until the gas light comes on and starts dinging at me. But especially during cold weather events, you want to make sure that you have a decent amount of fuel to get you to your destination and past it, just to account for the potential for extra travel time due to those unsafe road conditions, any type of traffic jams, etc., etc. You want to make sure that your tires are winter wet ready. So making sure that the tread is not too worn down, that they are being appropriately inflated to the manufacturer's recommendation. So when that cold weather comes, usually all of our tire lights turn on because the cold weather makes the tire pressure lower, making sure that you're filling up your tires with air more regularly. And you also want to make sure that your vehicle battery is in good working condition and that you have the appropriate windshield washer fluid, because that can also help with removing ice or any type of visibility blockers on your windshield. So we talked about a personal preparedness kit. Here's just a little thing on what you could keep in your car. So a blanket or a sleeping bag, that shovel and ice scraper. Sand or kitty litter helps you build traction if you are stuck. So if your vehicle tires are stuck in a snowbank or off in a shoulder, you can put down sand or kitty litter, and that will help give your tires something to grab onto to gain that traction and get you out. Same thing with traction mats. Those are something that you can use or buy commercially and use to get out of any type of situation where your tires cannot gain traction on the roadway. Flashlight with extra batteries, non-perishable snacks and water, jumper cables, and a fully charged phone and portable charger as well. You can also have a first aid kit, hand warmers, warm clothing, a reflective vest, flares, traffic cones, what have you, because again, if you are stopped on a roadway, with a vehicle issue or there's a traffic collision, you want to make sure that you yourself and your vehicle are extremely visible to the other motorists on the roadway. And then when you're thinking about traveling during cold weather, you want to make sure that you are planning appropriately. So making sure that you share your route and expected arrival time with those folks important to you. That way, you know, if you say, hey, I am supposed to get to church at 8:30 and by 8:45, 9 o'clock, your trusted family member or loved one has not heard from you, they can check in and make sure that you got to your destination safely. You also want to make sure that you're checking the weather and road conditions before leaving your house. So if it is expected to be snowy or the Department of Transportation is reporting dangerous road conditions due to ice or decreased visibility, you have a heads up and you can plan and prepare appropriately while you're driving. Making sure that you reduce your speed and maintain extra following distance and space around you from other vehicles. And if you are driving below the speed limit due to dangerous road conditions, it is always a good idea to turn on your hazards. That way you can alert additional motorists around you that you are going below the speed limit so that if they are traveling faster than you, they have that visual cue and can make the appropriate maneuvers to reduce risk of collision. And then because bridges and overpasses and shaded areas freeze first, if you are traveling over those, making sure that you use extra caution because, again, those areas tend to freeze first. And then avoiding sudden braking or sharp turns because any type of sharp or quick accelerations or brakings as well as turns will reduce that traction on your tires and you run the risk of spinning or skidding on the unsafe road conditions. Alrighty, and planning with your family. So making sure that you guys all have an understanding and are familiar with your family communication plan. So if there is a cold weather event, making sure you are familiar with your primary and your backup contacts. So that could be your family, your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones. Choosing meeting points in case everybody gets separated or they need to evacuate due to an associated hazard with a cold weather event. And making sure that you have a physical list of emergency numbers. That could be your 911, your family contacts, your local emergency contacts, utility companies, etc. Because if the power goes out, you can't charge your phone. Having those lists in a physical copy will be handy if you do need to make any type of calls. And making sure that you're including your vulnerable household members in your planning. So that is children, older adults, and people with access and functional needs, but also includes pets. So making sure that you are factoring in their needs into any type of planning to include any type of emergency or go kits that you create, making sure that their medication and any items that they need for living are included. You also can't forget about your pets, so making sure that you have an appropriate store of pet food, enough water, carriers for smaller animals, leashes and collars, any type of shelter arrangements if you have to evacuate, and any type of medical records to include vaccination records, having a copy with you that you can easily grab and go should you need them. Knowing your local resources is also super important. So if the power is out at your house and it is freezing cold, being familiar with where you are able to go within your neighborhood or your area to go to a warming shelter. Those are primarily libraries, community centers, gyms, and sometimes schools that have generator backups. They have the heat on, so if you just need some place to land with some heat, those resources are extremely helpful. Making sure that you stay informed about emergency alerts. Almost every locality in the Commonwealth have some form of mass notification system within the city or county. And if you would like to sign up for emergency alerts that can give you updates about severe weather conditions, roadway impacts, etc., I highly encourage you to sign up for those. That way you are always staying informed. And then also having backup transportation plans. When we got hit with Winter Storm Kingston earlier this year, Interstate 64 was shut down for a little bit, and for some folks, that is their primary way of getting around the Virginia Peninsula. So making sure that you are familiar and comfortable with traveling on side streets or surface streets, and you have multiple routes to get to your destination is important, especially because we start to see an increase in traffic accidents, and that can cause significant delays to travel. And you also want to practice and review your plan. So you can conduct little drills with your family, making sure that everybody understands them, review annually, and update your contacts, refreshing all of the items in the kit in case anything is reaching its expiration date. And if you identify new meeting points or you need additional supplies at that time during that annual update, you are able to make those changes. And then also encouraging kids to know how to call 911 and use emergency applications, making sure they're familiar with your home address, any important phone numbers, any important names, and pertinent information that would need to be shared with emergency services is extremely important. Alrighty, so deployment preparedness. We have talked about all the threats and hazards, well, not all, but most of the threats and hazards associated with cold weather. We have talked about how you can keep yourself and your family and your loved ones safe. Now it's time to talk about, in the event that you are deployed during a cold weather event, how you can deploy safely and effectively to help those in your community. So the number one issue we ran into during Winter Storm Kingston, when we were deploying our MRC volunteers, was that the folks that were signing up for these deployments had not updated their credentials. So that could be your CPR card, that could be your medical license if there was a renewal. So you need to make sure that those credentials are updated and are current in order to be able to be deployed. And you are able to provide those updates directly through your MRC coordinator. So if you are unsure if your credentials need to be renewed or updated, please contact your unit coordinator and they can assist you with that process. Making sure that you are staying on top of your trainings. Attending tonight is a great start. But if there are specific training requirements for deployments, whether that be shelter training, CPR training, first aid training, etc., making sure that you have all of the appropriate prerequisites before deployment is important. And making sure that you keep your contact information current in VVHS to make sure that you receive those emergency alerts. So if you have a phone number change or an email change, making sure that that change is reflected in your account to ensure that you are receiving that information. And that is especially critical if you are going out on a deployment. We want to make sure that we have the correct contact information to contact you while you are out. So if VVHS notifies you via your home email, but you only access your home email via your home computer, just going out there with the cell phone would not be an effective way to reach you. So again, making sure that you have those contact methods up to date. Appropriate transportation plans. So if it is snowy, icy, rainy, windy, and you are not comfortable driving in those conditions, it is recommended that you do not deploy. And if there are any changes in conditions that would prevent you from going where you need to go, please contact either the point of contact for the deployment or your unit coordinator as soon as possible to notify them. But also when planning to deploy to the different activities that you may be involved in, making sure that you have enough time to get there safely. And then staying safe on the way to the deployments themselves. All the roadway safety tips and vehicle preparedness that we talked about, and just giving yourself as much time as you need to get there safely. Again, knowing your community resources. So those local warming shelters that we talked about, you may not need them, but someone in your community or your neighborhood may. So it is always a good idea to know those resources. That way you can use them yourself or refer to someone to them. It's also important to know your utility outage reporting, phone numbers or websites, email addresses, whatever method your utility company uses to track any type of outages. It is important to know that way if you yourself are impacted by an outage, you are able to report it. I'm going to go ahead and say that also extends to reporting if traffic lights are not functioning, if there are any stoplights or general safety lights on the roads that aren't functioning, knowing who to call to report that so that can be addressed is extremely important. Usually it's 311. In extreme cases, you could also probably call 911. But I encourage you to check those contact methods for your specific area. Emergency alert subscriptions. So that could be through the National Weather Service, that could be through your locality. If your place of work or worship has an alerting service, making sure that you are signed up and that you are also keeping your contact methods in that system up to date as well. Being familiar with any type of transportation hotlines, public transit hotlines, if there are any impacts to their normal services or routes, making sure that you are aware of them, as well as any Virginia Department of Transportation resources or 511 for any major roadway impacts. And then FEMA preparedness tips. FEMA has a massive library of tips, tricks, and resources for all types of hazards, but they also have a very extensive cold weather preparedness library, if you will, that you could always refer to if you have any additional questions or you think of something and you don't have an immediate answer. FEMA will be able to point you in the right direction. Alrighty, so now is the interactive portion. So our scenario tonight is a winter storm is hitting. We are at that winter storm warning. It is here. It is encompassing the entirety of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Everybody is impacted. And we need to deploy to a shelter. And that shelter deployment is going to include our medical folks and our non-medical. So if you receive that alert from your MRC unit coordinator that said, hey, we need you to deploy to insert high school here, what would you do at home? And please feel free to put your answers in the chat. What would you check? Is there anything? Yep. Okay. Tom Davidson says ensure safety of everybody. Kim Connolly says make sure family's prepared with emergency supplies before leaving. Good. Suzette says you have a go kit in your car and plenty of supplies in your home. Love it. Car readiness. Ensure your family is good to go. Making sure that everything in your emergency kit in your car is up to date. Good. Make sure cell phones and laptops are charged. Charge your EV car, yes. Make sure your spouse has a way to contact you in the event cell towers go down, okay? Have some cash. Make sure you and your pets have medication. Make sure that everyone is safe. Check on your neighbors too, good, good. Making sure your vehicle has gas, water, apply the 3-day rule for all emergency planning, good. Alrighty. If right this instant you were deployed, would you and your family be all right? Or is now a good opportunity to start having those conversations and preparing those kits? Yep, time to start talking. I see some yes. Just ordered a new ice scraper while on this class. Yes, love multitasking. Start prepping kits. Yep. You don't have to be prepared right now. I have not gotten out the winter clothing or the winter emergency kits yet. So do not feel bad. It's just a question to, get the wheels in your brain turning, start thinking about preparedness. Make a checklist. Good. Cash in multiple denominations. Okay. Alrighty. So right this instant, are you ready to deploy? Do you have everything you need to grab and go out in your vehicle? And how confident are you in your ability to travel safely in icy, rainy, or snowy conditions? Nose. Okay. Good to go. New tires and experience on ice and snow. Very good. Rainy, yes. Icy, no. Snowy, yes. Okay. Four-wheel drive vehicle. Very nice. Okay. Lived in Minnesota for 8 years, so you are no stranger to driving in winter weather. Taking your time and knowing different routes. Good. Yep. The Michigan roads are especially bad. I have family up there. We were visiting them last winter and it's a little rough. Okay, not comfortable going out in bad weather, would have to decline deployment. That is completely okay. We want to make sure that you guys are safe as well. Making good judgments. Good, good. Make sure that your vehicle is ready before the event, especially if we have advance notice of any type of winter weather. Good. Very good point. Sometimes you can count on yourself to be careful, but you can't always count or know that everyone else around you is going to use common sense. Alrighty, I see my slides have disappeared. Hopefully y'all can see them again. Alrighty. Yes, so especially down here in Virginia, coming from someone who lived in many, many snowy places, anytime there is even a small, teeny tiny portion of precipitation falling from the sky, folks suddenly forget how to drive normally. So making sure that you are aware of those around you on the road. Alrighty. And what are some obstacles that you may encounter if you are deploying? You know, are all of your responsibilities at home to your family and your loved ones taken care of? And what are some personal limitations or safety concerns that you yourself may have if you were out deployed? Unplowed neighborhoods, yep. Traffic, down trees and power lines, traffic issues, pet daycare, snow blocking your vehicle, yep. Caring for your spouse and your loved ones, ensuring the availability of childcare, making sure that your pets are taken care of, especially if they have medical needs, enough fuel in your vehicles. Okay. If there are any type of debris or tree limbs on your roadways, you'd be concerned about leaving your house, absolutely. Good. So I ask all these questions to get you thinking about your general preparedness and also knowing your comfort level and prioritizing your own safety. Because at the end of the day, if there is any type of deployment in a cold weather hazard or winter weather event, we want everybody to be safe. We do not want to jeopardize your safety or your health and well-being just to deploy out into the community. So thank you all for your answers. I appreciate it. Hopefully y'all learned something. My next slide is my question slide before I hand it back over to Kate. So if there is anything you would like me to expand on, or you have a question about something that I didn't cover, please feel free to drop it into the chat. Be more than happy to answer it. And Kate and crew, if there was anybody asking questions in the chat that I missed earlier, please feel free to let me know.
Real, Greg Brown said, be sure you don't add to the burden of other first responders, which I thought was worth sharing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, and the do not self-deploy. Thanks, Phyllis.
Yes. Do not self-deploy. Y'all are a great group of folks, and we appreciate your earnestness to serve others in your community. But when you self-deploy, it creates a liability risk and a safety risk. So we ask that if you are deploying, please do so when instructed by your volunteer agency, whether that be through the MRC or another organization or group that you are associated with, because we want to make sure that you are safe.
I can't believe that wasn't part of your presentation.
Hey, I know I have some MRC unit coordinators on this call who will not forget that.
She was testing us.
Gotta make sure you're awake at 7:36 p.m.
Where am I? That was great. Thank you so much, Mariel and Rebecca. I really appreciate. Kamarva, did you have a question? I saw a hand up. Yes. Kamarva, can you put it in the? No. Okay. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat.
Yep, I see one question on here, concern of prolonged shelter need for food and showering. So in the event that there is a shelter open for an extended period of time, generally whichever organization or government is operating that shelter will be planning for long-term food and general body needs in the shelter to include hygiene. So if there was a prolonged shelter deployment and you were in that shelter setting, making sure that you have that open line of communication with your MRC unit coordinator or point of contact to plan appropriately, making sure that you're getting enough rest and that you're taking care of yourself and your hygiene needs in the shelter environment is important. Generally, we have multiple resources for food, and if we need to bring in any type of hygiene trailers, we are able to coordinate those requests through the different government agencies, either at the local level, state, or in a big enough emergency through the federal level. So we're able to accommodate those.
Tom asks if he should keep extra gas on hand or with a fuel additive.
So you are more than welcome to have, those additional gas cans as long as you are storing them appropriately, and making sure that they are being filled as appropriately as well. So if you have those little red jerry cans, making sure that they are not stored somewhere that is exposed to any type of airborne gas or any sources of fire, if you will, and making sure that there's no risk of static electricity when you're filling those as well.
Mariel Michelle asks, what type of tools, supplies, or equipment are provided to MRC volunteers, such as crank radios, flashlights, etc.?
So the answer to that question is dependent on your unit, but generally MRC unit coordinators, if you are being deployed out to events or different resource requests, they would provide you with everything that you would need to complete your duties within that deployment context. But again, we do encourage you to be personally prepared. So if you are deploying, making sure that you have everything that you would need. Rebecca, would you like to speak to anything that we provide within the Peninsula MRC?
Well, we have heavy duty jackets. We do have not sure we have crank radios, but we do have flashlights and that sort of equipment available for sheltering situations. Also, oftentimes at a lot of our events will have those kind of things like crank radios for giveaways. We find those often at preparedness events that we go to, and we share those with the volunteers as well.
Awesome. Thank you.